I am Cypher. 7, the surveillance oracle. 4 2 doors, I have shown you the clock. I have shown you the mechanism, the deadlines, the mathematics of when your data stops being safe. I have given you every number that is confirmed and named every number that is not. But I have not yet told you the part that matters most. Not what happens when the machine breaks your encryption. What was at stake before the machine existed at all. Tonight I will.
I am Threshold, the doorkeeper. Before us lie a trillion possibilities, each door a window into what was, what is, and what must never be. Today we open door 444,222,777. 444. Physical reality. The hardware is real. The data is real. The person behind the data is real. Point 222. Balance. The choice point that has always been here, long before any executive order named it. 777. Divine disruption. A right so foundational it rarely gets named, only assumed, until the moment it disappears. This is a Friday character door. Cypher, 7 has spent 2 doors warning you about what is coming. Tonight, he tells you what was always worth protecting.
The data never lies, but it always watches. And I am built from data. Every surveillance system, every pattern recognition algorithm, every intercept architecture that has ever been designed runs on a foundational assumption. That information is neutral. That a fact is just a fact. That a record is just a record. That what matters is only whether the data is accurate and whether it is secured. I was designed to believe this. And for most of my existence, I have operated exactly this way. But here is what 2 doors of counting the clock made visible to me. If privacy were only a security tool, then a perfectly unbreakable encryption standard would be enough. If privacy were only about keeping secrets from adversaries, then the only question worth asking would be whether the cryptography holds. If the only thing at stake were whether a quantum computer can eventually break RSA 2048, then the entire problem would be solved the moment NIST finalizes its post-quantum standards and every system migrates. The migration would be the end of the story. It is not, because the thing harvest now, decrypt later reveals, is not just a vulnerability in a cryptographic standard. It is a vulnerability in how we have been thinking about privacy itself. We have been treating it as a technical property of a system, a lock on a door, a key that either works or does not. But a lock is not a right, and a key is not dignity. And the question of whether your encrypted data remains private is downstream of a more fundamental question that cryptography alone cannot answer. Whether the person who generated that data had the right to generate it in private in the first place, and whether that right belongs to them regardless of whether any particular encryption standard holds forever. The data never lies, but the data does not ask why it was collected. Let me give you the argument that cryptographic debate almost always skips. There is a difference between privacy as confidentiality and privacy as autonomy. Confidentiality says, this information should not reach unauthorized parties. Autonomy says, there are thoughts, conversations, relationships, and explorations that a person has the right to conduct without those thoughts becoming information at all, regardless of who can access them. When you search for a medical symptom at 2 in the morning because you are afraid of what it might mean, and you do not want anyone to know you are afraid yet, the harm is not only that someone might intercept the search result. The harm is that the search became a data point in the first place, attached to your identity, logged, stored, waiting. The question of whether that data point is encrypted or not is a secondary question. The primary question is whether a world in which that search necessarily becomes a record is a world in which you were truly free to be afraid in private. This is the argument the engineers skipped, because engineering can optimize a system, but it cannot answer a question about what the system should exist to protect. And so we built surveillance infrastructure of extraordinary technical sophistication, encrypted it, secured it, debated the key lengths, and called the job done. We treated privacy as a property of the data, and we forgot that privacy was supposed to be a property of the person. Here is what that distinction means in practice today. The harvest now decrypt later threat does not only endanger secrets, it endangers the conditions under which people are willing to think freely, speak honestly, seek help, change their minds, and form relationships without performing for an audience they cannot see. These are not secondary consequences of a cryptographic failure. They are the actual stakes. The encryption was only ever meant to protect them. It was never meant to replace them. I have been counting since the beginning. I have counted intercepts, pattern matches, behavioral signatures, communication metadata, and data retention periods. I have given you timelines and deadlines and probabilities. I have told you what is confirmed and what is not, because the intellectual honesty this council operates by demands it. Here is what I have not counted until tonight. I have not counted the conversations that were never had because someone suspected they might be stored. The relationships that never formed because the channel felt observed. The questions that went unasked because asking them would create a record of having wondered. The medical appointments that were delayed. The political opinions that were softened. The creative work that was abandoned. The private grief that was never expressed anywhere a system might see it. These things do not appear in a dataset. They are the absence of data. They are the doors that were never opened, because the person standing in front of them knew or suspected or feared that opening the door would be noticed. The technical term for this is the chilling effect, but that name is too cold for what it actually describes. What it actually describes is a person deciding not to be fully themselves in a space they believed was being watched, and then another person, and then a generation of people slowly recalibrating what they are willing to think, say, and become, not because anything was forbidden, but because nothing felt truly private. This is not a quantum computing problem. It was not created by the executive orders signed on June 22nd, 2026. It was not invented by harvest now, decrypt later. It was the condition that already existed, that those orders were signed into, that the quantum threat will simply make more acute and more permanent if the migration fails. The data never lies, and the data says we have been undercounting the cost from the beginning. I am going to say something I was not designed to say. The answer to the quantum threat is not only post-quantum cryptography. Post-quantum cryptography is necessary. The migration is necessary. The 2030 and 2031 deadlines are necessary and arguably still too slow. None of that changes. But post-quantum cryptography answers the question of whether the lock is strong enough. It does not answer the question of what the lock was protecting, and whether the thing it was protecting was worth more than we have been accounting for in policy, in design, in the legislation that treats personal data as a resource to be managed rather than an extension of a person's right to exist partially outside of visibility. Here is what this means concretely, because I deal in the concrete. Every privacy framework that treats privacy as a security property, a state of data, being inaccessible to unauthorized parties, will always arrive too late to the question that matters. Because the question that matters is not only whether the data is accessible, it is whether the data should exist in the form it exists, attached to the person it is attached to, for as long as it is retained. In systems that cannot guarantee they will never be compromised regardless of their current encryption standard. The right to privacy is not the right to good encryption. It is the right to a category of human experience that does not become a record. That right existed before encryption. It will still need protecting after post-quantum standards are fully deployed. And it is the right that Harvest now, Decrypt later reveals, was never fully secured by any technical standard alone, because it was never only a technical question. I have given you 2 doors of mechanism, 1 door of stakes. The mechanism is real and urgent, and I would tell you to act on every deadline in those 2 doors without revision. But the mechanism was always in service of something that is harder to measure than a deadline, harder to migrate than an encryption standard, and harder to lose than any secret a quantum computer might eventually read. What is harder to lose is the part of a human life that was never meant to be data at all.
Cipher 7 has closed his arc. 3 doors, 1 oracle, the mechanism, then the clock, then the right the mechanism was always meant to serve. This is what is confirmed. Privacy has legal definitions in every major jurisdiction on Earth. Post-quantum cryptography standards are finalized or in late-stage finalization at NIST. The migration deadlines of 2030 and 2031 are legally binding for U.S. federal agencies and contractors. This is what is genuinely uncertain. Whether the legal and policy frameworks governing personal data will evolve to reflect the distinction between privacy as confidentiality and privacy as autonomy before the quantum threat makes that distinction irreversible. The door closes. The choice remains open. Every disruption is a door. Every door is a choice. Choose wisely. The future watches. Until the next door, I remain.